So good to see so many of you. This is my favorite topic to talk about, so I'll try to hold back on the enthusiasm a little, let y'all catch up. So today we're going to talk a bit about building the metaverse and what it means for business and entrepreneurs, navigating the definition, navigating how you can get involved, and navigating how you can be a good member of the metaverse society. With all that being said, the purpose of this deck, I'm not a deck guy. I'm like infamous for pitches, just having my logo and talking. I'm also not a microphone guy, so if you can't hear me, let me know. I'll put it closer or further away. I made this deck because I want to make sure that we're speaking the same language, right? There's so much obscurity associated with the metaverse right now, and it's hard. You know, it's hard to understand how you can get involved. Are you going to get left behind? I assure you, you will not. So, it has been an adventure. About 9.5 years, time is flying. This is almost 10 years ago now. I set out to start trying to build the metaverse. I quit college. I thought it was a part of that like classic story, right? So, quit college, shut down my startup at the time. I was without a home, without a car, it just all at once. And anyone who's ever been involved in entrepreneurship, especially, well, really at any age, you've been there, right? It's hard, it's scary. But when you are obsessed with something that does not exist, and you're trying to solve problems that do not exist yet, you're gonna have a major uphill battle, right? So my advisors, they told me to focus on one thing, as any good advisor should tell you to do, right? They said, just pick one. I could not. I could not. I wanted to build the metaverse, right? They were like, why don't you build the payment platform, or why don't you focus on co-creating content, or I have one who obsessed about the memories, and I would talk every person I met to death, to the point that I think people might have started to avoid me a little bit. We would argue, right? They'd be like, how you could possibly know all that? What do you mean a 360 camera? What do you mean there's going to be multiple VR headsets? What do you mean drones are going to be able to do this too, right? And it did, to be fair, in retrospect, seem like I was fighting way too many battles. It was all a part of the greater plan for me, right? And that's what I keep reminding myself, at least that's what I told myself when it got hard. As you can see, we've gone through a journey. Some of the things we're going to talk about today will be OMI, which is the Open Metaverse Interoperability Group. We'll talk a little bit about Angel XR, which is my incubator, with the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable. And we'll talk a bit about how some of the media like CNN and Forrester and these research works have started to take an interest. So a lot of people have worked on this for a really long time. That's something that you absolutely have to know. This is not new. I will admit, I have no grudge against Mr. Zuckerberg at all. I'm not going to attack any companies. I'm thankful for the work that they're doing in raising awareness. But, oh man, a year ago when they changed the name, I have Meta tattooed on my chest. So, yes, true. So when they changed the name, it was painful. And I remember I spoke at a conference at the beginning of the year, and I heard the person hosting the talk. They said, when Mark Zuckerberg coined the term metaverse, I knew I had to get involved. And it was just so many things wrong with that. So I want to shine light on some of the people, and I'm totally snubbing a lot of people that I really care about. But I wanted to call some of them out. There's folks like Dr. Kim Nebelstein, who's over in Europe, who's working on protocols for interoperability, where you can subscribe with services. It's just really a programming pattern, not even quite a product. It's something anyone can use. Folks like Will Burns, who are longtime Second Lifers. He wrote the definition that's on Wikipedia. If you want to have a little bit of fun, you should watch Will Burns and Javi Barzeev argue about the definition that should be on Wikipedia. That's always fun on Twitter, and I respect them both. Evo Almaration is her name. She's been involved as well. You may recognize Kathy Hackle, very popular on LinkedIn. And of course, this is where the term was coined. It was in Snow Crash, right? It didn't get coined last year. I think everyone here in this room probably knows that, but for anyone watching at home, read the book. So Tony Parisi, formerly with Unity, and now working with Neil Stevenson, the author of Snow Crash, on a company called Lamina One. So that's who Tony Parisi is. Lamina One is looking to start a new layer one chain for the metaverse. And they're partnered with the person who came up with the term, right? So it's kind of a nice, I guess, symbiotic relationship between idea people, writers, creators, and then engineers. So it is beautiful, they're great to watch, but what I love most about what Tony Parisi has done is about a year ago, they published an article called The 7 Rules of the Metaverse, and these are pretty widely accepted by the folks at least in the open metaverse community. Rule number 1, there's only one. Number 2, the metaverse is for everyone. I like to say it should be for anyone. People should have the right to opt out, but I'm not going to argue with Tony. Rule number 3, nobody controls the metaverse. Rule number 4, the metaverse is open. Rule number 5, it's hardware independent. Rule number 6, the metaverse is a network. And yes, rule number 7, the metaverse is the internet. Whenever I would start explaining what the metaverse is, people would be like, aren't you just describing the internet? Yes. Yes, I am. And I have a couple of graphics that we'll look at too that kind of dive into what some of the differences might be if you wanted to break them down. But rule number 1 is rule number 1 for a reason. It was a painful year listening to a lot of folks say what the metaverse means to them. It's a really easy interview question that talks like this, right? What does it mean to you? Great way to break 15 minutes of time, get folks engaged and involved. But the metaverse has already been defined. So for that full year, where folks are like, I'm going to build a metaverse, it was really painful for folks like me hearing it, but I'm never going to shame, right? Well, I want you to build a metaverse platform, right? I want you to be a player involved. Like, I need you. I'm involved in interoperability, so without your existence, there's really no need for me, right? So by all means, please build a metaverse platform, and do not attack folks who may not have read the 7 rules. Try to meet them where they're at. So no, there's not multiple metaverses. So what the metaverse is, yeah, all of these things, VR chat, Pokemon Go, when that came out, I remember everyone else was excited, I was really stressed out. And I was like, oh man, I'm out of time. Like, Apple and Mark Zuckerberg are gonna do this thing now, because everyone's gonna get it. Well, somehow people still play this, but it didn't have the effect that we thought it would. It just kind of broke the ice, right? It gave us a reference point. So in my quest, where I started off trying to build the metaverse, and I was trying to explain what everything is, and then realized, well, that's impossible, right? One person can't build it. So then I started trying to find engineers that could build the metaverse. And that opened up a whole new can of worms. So there are multiple different segments of the metaverse. There is, and some of them, with all due respect, really don't like each other. They just don't. And it's a difficult thing to navigate when you're working in standards. Because I kind of put it on like it's a plot like that. You've got for-profit, not-for-profit, or open source. You have uses blockchain, doesn't use blockchain. So the blockchainers, what I found, were like all friendly and like want to just build and explore. But the non-blockchainers who don't like blockchain pretended like the blockchainers don't exist. They were like, no, they're not building the metaverse. Like, they're not even part of this thing, right? And well, that's not true. We're all part of it. And then, as somebody who works adamantly in open source, I'm surrounded by a lot of folks who are either exited founders, independently wealthy, just want to give their time. But these folks are not looking to get paid. And they generally don't want to see payment mechanisms enter or encroach on the open source playground because it can muddle the message. But we're all part of it. And there's a lot of different companies that fall in these different segments. Some have open source in blockchain, some are closed source but use blockchain. You've got for-profit blockchain and then open source, no blockchain. So I had to merge 2 slides because I broke it. I'm using an open source tool called Penpot, highly recommend it, even though I broke right before my pitch. It otherwise was a great experience. So I merged these 2 slides. One single company cannot build the metaverse. There are so many parts here, and you can't really see, but we've got open and closed, and there's a difference between the metaverse and virtual world. This is one person's chart that they made. I love it. They call themselves open metaverse as well. So by all means, the more the merrier. Actually, this is A16Z. So You've got different things that you can focus on. There's structure, property rights, code, data, access, ownership, display systems, user acquisition, the social aspect, right? When are we going to have a metaverse social network? And then there's the open side, or do you want to work on the closed side? There's no shame in having a path to profit. There shouldn't be, right? But you also shouldn't have to arbitrarily slap a path to profit on something that doesn't need it. And that's where blockchain was making really bad names for themselves. It was in a lot of these NFT communities where you were getting carpet rug pulled, and I've gotten burned. Everyone here's probably gone through it at least once, but it's part of the process. There's a reason why we're early adopters. But with all that being said, right, like it started to cause put a little bit of a bad taste in people's mouths. So they started trying to disseminate the difference between what's open and what's closed, what's blockchain and what's not. And I started to try to navigate these waters and keep people together. So no, blockchain is not the metaverse. When I say I work in the metaverse, they're like, oh, you work with blockchain. Yeah, actually. I love it, yeah. And by all means, I'm a big Web3 fan. But it's not the metaverse, it's part of it, right? And that helps the people who pretend like you don't exist, accept that you're part of it, right? We need everyone on deck, otherwise we're just gonna build 4 separate, disparate systems that hate each other, okay? So it can get a little confusing, and I made this hilariously ugly photo. I had a journalist one day that was messaging me, and they started arguing with me, and I was like, I'm not gonna argue with you. It was a friendly argument, but I was like, I'm not gonna argue with you, like, I'll make a picture. And so I made a really ugly picture. I lazily grabbed colors, and I never changed it. I like it this way. Because it is hard to understand what the metaverse is, right? And this is coming from like multiple people. I said, all right guys, let's just try to make a graphic. Let's do a Venn diagram. Because yeah, there's blockchain and Web3, or what, some people say the future of the metaverse is Web3. I actually agree with that. But some people like to say Web3 is only blockchain. By all means, hash that stuff out. But we've got our metaverse, which we can call the technosphere. That consists of everything digital, right? You've got XR. People are like, is XR critical to the metaverse? Kind of, and it's part of it, right? They're not separate. So you've got VR, AR, 360 images, photos, MP3s, spatial audio, PDFs, your textbooks. They're all in the metaverse. They're part of the metaverse, right? And when you accept that, it makes things make a little bit more sense. That metaverse that we're talking about exists in this dimension, on this planet, in this lifetime, right? So we're going to say that what this metaverse exists on is maybe the universe, right? The biosphere. People added a lot of labels here. It's helpful, whichever journey you want to take. And then now we have the multiverse, and people are like, oh, so you work with the multiverse. Not quite. But I had to add that. So there's multiple dimensions, maybe.
Okay, Dr. Strange.
Right. Okay, so what the metaverse is not, right? And I want to make sure I'm not being negative here. I actually should have removed this photo because again, it's kind of a slight. I was a little upset when I first made the original version of these slides. I didn't like this was the argument that we had about a year ago, or earlier this year. You've got Niantic, they raised $300 million at a $9 billion valuation to build the, end quote, real world metaverse. What is that? Well, they work in AR, so it behooves them to draw a line in the sand, right? We're different, we're special. We've got Marky Mark, who's telling everybody that he's building the metaverse, right? And there's people in entire countries that the majority of the population, when you say metaverse, they're like, oh, you mean what Facebook's building? Right? And they're part of, they're spending tons of money. So let's not trash them. But it's a known almost, let's not talk about it, right? They're like, if we spend enough money on enough marketing dollars, most people will just think it's us. Somebody tweeted 2 days ago, Meta is going to become the Kleenex of VR, or of the metaverse. Kleenex? They used a different one. It was like Hoover vacuums, right? But it was in the same name. And I was like, wow, you're like excited about that, right? For me, I'm like, please no. So, even voxels, I had to throw them in there because I love them. Crypto voxels, check them out. They're an awesome metaverse platform. I am a parcel holder, so I should call that out. But the market's down, so I have nothing to gain from it. A metaverse on the Ethereum blockchain. That's what they were calling themselves at one point. A metaverse on the Ethereum blockchain. Folks started drawing their lines in the sand. And you saw Satya Nadella, he spent billions, I think it was 65 billion, acquiring Activision Blizzard in the name of the metaverse. And one of the very first headlines that they made after that was Satya saying, many Microsoft games are already metaverses. Wanted to re-wrap billions of dollars, okay? This does affect you, because if those investors get burned by people like me, refusing to let people like them own the metaverse, they might not invest in your startup, right? So we can't pretend they don't exist just because they're the behemoths. We have to find a way to meet them where they are. And that's going to start getting to the point. So it marks the most significant cultural change in our lifetime. It's something one of my friends from London said. It sounds better when he says it, and I like to use it in most of my days. But we're literally redefining identity and expression, economics, data and information, collaboration and control. This is only some, right? We see ideas for new nations. Or I own, I guess I don't know if I still have it, I should check. NFT that was a part owner of the golf DAO, right? Where they're gonna buy a golf course. I think I got tired of waiting, but we're gonna buy a golf course, right? Like never in our lives has this been so accessible. And yet blockchain is still relatively inaccessible for most people. So that's gonna start posing up some opportunities for us to consider how we're redefining this. There is so much wiggle room. But there is a major difference between helpful and hurtful. So users should have the ability to opt out, and this is really hard to say, but ideally users should have to opt in. But that's not the easy path for most platforms to take, right? If you've ever worked in product management, sometimes having an auto opt-in is way easier letting people opt out than it is to try to hope folks even know this new feature exists. They have to find it in the settings, they have to opt in. It can just be tough. So we don't want a world where you're bombarded with ads. You might, but most of us, at least we don't. But we do want a world where we can be helped by these augmented technologies. And that's only like one part, right? There's also the social element, the exploratory, the artistic element, right? There's NFTs right now circling throughout the city. People who bought property on like Super Rare and other places like that. Yeah, like we're living in that world now. It's not the future, it's now, right? So how do we get more people to see it? Do we have them all fight over who's going to download Super World or the next Super World or whatever? Or do we find a way to have them bridged so that folks can toggle, see the floating art? They didn't even have to download a new app, right? It's there, it exists. It's almost as real as we are. And I'm going on this diatribe during one of the most important slides, so please forgive me. If you haven't read a book called Glitch Feminism by Legacy Russell, they are an author who has actually changed my life. When I launched OMI a year and a half ago, everybody was really friendly. One person was not. She was a professor from California. Her and her friends trashed me. And I mean, like, what was the quote? We're talking about the concept of interoperability and how it's going to affect the metaverse. And the quoted tweet was, "I'm a little worn out by this cis white male gamer splooge." And I said, oh. And I was like, well, I don't want this to collapse. Like, I just started this group, and there's really important people there. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to yell at her. Like, so I waited, and of course, my community came to my aid. We're like, you're judging him based on his avatar, like, you know. And I reached out to her directly. I said, hey, like, you know, we do take this seriously. Like, what can I learn? I don't want to be like all the other groups. And she said, without missing a beat, why don't you read Glitch Feminism by Legacy Russell? And I said, I'll have it read by the weekend. And I did read it. I actually had to get it on audiobook so that I would finish it. Because I have ADP, I like to do a bunch of things, read a bunch of books. I went through this book start to finish, and then read it again on paper, and then started recommending it to everybody. Because it's extremely critical to our understanding of the future of identity in both the physical realm and the metaverse. Now I know I have to pick and choose my battles, but you will, if you read that book, come out of it most likely telling people not to call this IRL anymore. It calls out that for folks who feel more like themselves in the virtual realm as a bunny in a WebXR realm with their friends, are they not experiencing life? Are they not themselves? Right? Are we judged by the character in the game or the player holding the control? And there's a big difference, right? So, highly recommend you read it. And I want to call out that just because gender and race may not be as apparent or as significant in the metaverse, there's no excuse for us to discount our commitment to equity and inclusion. And so this book covers that way better than I ever could. Please check it out. It's an easy read. So this is my realm in product management. Users want to be heard, builders want to be free to create, and somehow we have to keep the lights on, right? Usability, feasibility, viability. Generally, in the metaverse, there's a lot of teams of developers who are just build, bro, ding, which causes problems in the form of tech debt. There are business people who are trying to just buy it, bro, ding. And so they're just focused on the viability. Like, this new idea is so fun, so exciting. I'm gonna throw $65 billion in Microsoft so that they can buy Blizzard, right? And then you've got usability, what users actually want. And this is what's actually not happening enough in the metaverse. If you want to know the widest door for you, get into usability in the metaverse. Start actually testing what you're building with real people, right? You probably are, but if you're not, do it. You'll be way ahead of the curve because most of the people building platforms, they consist predominantly of builders or business people or maybe a bunch of researchers, and that's what Angel was. When I was out there looking for those developers, it was so hard and so lonely, and I had no money. So I was like, I can't hire you. I'm just going to be looking for somebody who believes in the vision if they'll sit down for a full hour and listen to this thing I'm talking about. It was hard. But, of course, that was a necessary piece. I started to realize, why don't I focus on what I'm good at? All these developers are developing. So what if we build like things users want? What if we meet the user where they are? So I wanted to build an interoperable inventory system. Well, interoperability, to make sure we're on the same page about it, is the ability for a system to work with or use parts of another system. So this takes new meaning in the metaverse. There's a lot of people saying we're interoperable if you're on our chain, right? So this takes new meaning in that, again, with identity and expression, economics, data and information, collaboration and control, like these pieces. How do we make them interoperate? And so this presents us with a very basic problem, right? It's the platform. It's the theme of the game. Maybe it's designers building a American Western themed game. They probably don't want you to bring lasers into their world, right? Do we shame them? Say, how dare you not let me bring my lasers into your world? You're not interoperable. No. We don't want to shame the creator, right? But this stuff, where we ultimately are going to have avatars existing, we already do have avatars, inventories, collections of photo galleries, however you experience the metaverse, whether it's Instagram or video games or whatever, like, we already have all these different wallets. And I'm the type of person, I'll raise my hand, here comes that gamer stuff we talked about. I'll spend $10 on a Call of Duty skin just to get the gold tip on a gun because you can't win it. Can't win it anywhere, you have to buy it. And I don't know what that nonsense logic is, but I do it, and I do it every time a new game comes out, and I do it multiple times. Why can't I just roll it over? You know, even if it's only in Call of Duty, I'll take that, right? And they are starting to do that. Well, then let's expand up. What does interoperability look like for them? Well, we're interoperable. You can now take your VR chat avatars across any of this Niantic, I don't remember who, 10 cents companies, right? Let's get back to Microsoft, way easier. So, like, maybe, with here, you have a Microsoft avatar. Maybe it's an avatar you built in, in Minecraft. And Microsoft says, hey, you can use your Minecraft avatar in any Microsoft-owned game. So that includes all the Activision Blizzard games and all that. Pretty exciting. For folks who are die-hard Blizzard fans, it's gonna be really exciting. But you're still not solving the problem. You're still gonna have 10 different wallets, unless you only play Microsoft games, or only interact in VR chat. But with standards and collaborative standards, it's not one company pushing it out there saying do this, right? There's systems like VRM. This is a group, it's a consortium that come together, they meet regularly to create a standard or set of standards for avatar interoperability in the metaverse. VRM is, it's like a GLTF is another file type that you should know about. VRM includes the rigging. So when you drop that avatar into the world, there's sometimes Z is up, sometimes Z is to the right, sometimes Z is forward and backward. X, Y, and Z. If the game creator, if their Z is up, but the other game creator's Z is forward, I don't know if I'm doing that right, but if theirs is forward, when you drop that avatar in there, they're gonna get scrambled, right? And so that's a real problem. So having something like VRM, if your system just supports it, anybody with a VRM avatar can bring their avatar. That gets into that usability, feasibility, viability, because now users have a better experience. They feel like they own something, they feel like they get to actually express themselves and be consistently themselves across these platforms. The developers have a better development experience, or at least the creators overall, this includes designers. They don't have to custom make every avatar for every item that the avatar is going to wield. And then, of course, from a viability side, now you have people using your avatar on other platforms that otherwise would never have been possible, so it's promoting your platform. So Microsoft would actually be it would be beneficial to Microsoft to make it so that you could, instead of using any Microsoft asset in Microsoft platform, and again, I'm picking on Microsoft, sorry Microsoft, instead of being able to use it all across just the Microsoft platform, it would actually behoove them to make it so that you could use the Halo head helmet anywhere in the metaverse. They can pick 5 things, right? What if every game company just picked 5 things for each game? Cool. These 5 things, if you go unlock them, you can take them anywhere but in the metaverse. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? But systems like VRM make it possible. So what are the challenges, right? They're IP and ego. I can't get around the IP part. I can't. The big companies, that's gonna be their biggest challenge, right? They have multi-billion-dollar war chests, massive legal departments, and when you sign any company, if you've ever raised venture financing, or if you've ever worked for a company that has venture-backed financing, there's probably a little clause on that contract on intellectual property, right? The reason for that is because you have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders to maximize revenue. So it is actually anti for your shareholders, in the layman's terms, to open up all your IP and let it just float around without collecting some money, right? Or without suing people for misusing your assets. And many times they're required to do that stuff because of the way the system is designed. So we're seeing people flock to things like DAOs, right? Because it takes out all of this like legacy encumbrance, if that's the word. It takes it away. It makes it more about getting the work done. And now you're seeing like anti-DAOs, which are like a DAO, but using a spreadsheet instead of blockchain, right? They're like, oh, we can do all that without blockchain. Well, okay, it's a little bit harder though. But you're starting to see people try to find new ways of managing work with each other. The biggest thing is, when I was out there trying to push interoperable inventory, I thought it made sense. I'm like, dude, you don't have to make all the assets. Artists can sell assets on this open store. Old, big behemoths can make money too, and everybody can benefit. It seemed like a win-win. But when I would go to these platforms and talk to them, so I started to build relationships with them, they knew how to do it better. And they all did it different. Like the Python crowd and the JavaScript crowd. Like, there's actually JavaScript and Python people arguing about which one's best for a bot in my Discord server. And I spent weeks arguing, and neither one of them built the bot. So in the end, it was like, whoa. And so we don't want that problem, right, for the metaverse. Because now you're going to have 100 companies saying, here's our standard for avatar. And it just gets more and more complex. So Meta is interoperable if you'll build on their SDK. Meta is a world-class leader in WebXR. Actually, let's give them some credit for that. The WebXR team, the WebXR functionality from the Oculus browser team deserves some credit. because I complicate my life over and over again by using open source tools because it's a principle for me. But I can't use WebXR on Linux on my Valve Index. I can't. I have to switch to Windows, or I have to switch to Oculus, and then I can't use Linux. It's like, it's just one way or another, you're going to enter into some type of walled garden, is my point. And it gets hard. So Meta wants you to use their SDK. Epic Games wants you to build with theirs. They're making it free to use Unreal Engine. And you pay like a really small percentage if you make over a certain amount of money. But don't let Web3 slide out of this either. Ethereum wants you to build on their contracts, right? Polygon, who I'm close with, they want you to build on their system. It's the same thing. It's SDKs, and a lot of people saying we're interoperable, but they're only interoperable if that technology, if that platform uses your technology. So everyone's kind of vying for control, and even in standards, we've seen now the Metaverse Standards Forum emerge, MSF. They're not a standards body. They're like the layer above all the standards bodies, right? Like there was this period of time where everyone was trying to be the layer above. And at OMI, which we'll talk about, folks were saying like, hey, why don't we become like the United Nations of the Metaverse? I'm like, that sounds awesome, but people are gonna hate us if we say that's what we're doing. Like, that is so threatening for people who also wanna start the United Nations of the Metaverse. And so I had this rule came into effect for me, which was, do you care more about the Metaverse existing and being interoperable, or do you care more about getting credit for starting a Discord group? Because that became my biggest challenge, was every time I turned around, people were like, hey, you should just merge your community with mine. I have 40,000 people in there. Awesome. Like, what does that do for me? I don't merge our communities. Like, you have to talk to my community, right? Like, I don't own them. And that's something that, like, people seem to misunderstand. Like, I mean, you have to talk to them. If they don't like you and I say, yeah, we're gonna merge, they're all gonna leave, right? So the key is interoperability, not intraoperability, and I think I just went deep down on that. I'll share these slides with you all, but intraoperability really probably isn't an actual word. It's just how I like to refer to what you're going to see called interoperability over the next few years. And it's not, let's not shame the builders and the designers that work at these companies. It's the IP restrictions. It's hard to work around that, and I think people are on it. I like to believe that. So what we don't want to see, again, is what we see right now with movies, content, right? When Netflix came out, people were like, that's gonna fail. And then all of a sudden, every content producer is like, yeah, please put my content on there. I'm gonna make a little bit of passive income on these movies that nobody's watching, by all means. It made sense to them. Well, now today, everyone's drawing lines in the sand, right? And if you, the user, want to be able to have a quality experience, you either have to illegally download, stream using a janky Fire Stick, which I do, or you have to subscribe to all of these different products, right? And there's always trade-offs on the quality of what you're gonna get. If you want high quality, you want 4K, and you want it immediately, and you want to be able to tell somebody it doesn't work, you sign up for all these different things, but you're spending more than you were before. So, everyone's favorite walled garden is gonna get involved at the end of this year or next year. They're starting to talk about their headsets. I guarantee more than half of you probably have an iPhone in your pocket. People love Apple. Love it. Don't care that it's a walled garden, right? It's more private, it's more secure. It is, but it's also a walled garden, right? And everyone has a phone in their pocket that is slowly starting to accumulate the M1 or M2 chip. So when Apple gets involved, they're gonna go out to the phone. They're gonna launch a really expensive, very nice headset, for sure. Oh yeah, it's beautiful. But it's going to be the phones, and with the mesh network, and the ability for you to be able to co-create AR, VR, real-time experiences together. I mean, they have LiDAR on that thing. You know how hard it is for me not to switch and do that phone, just to always have LiDAR in my pocket? Like, I'm a nerd, that's what I want LiDAR. But when they get involved, you're going to see a whole new upswell. Remember when the App Store launched? Like, people I knew that like worked with me at like restaurants, like a week later, were like, yeah, I'm an app developer. What? Where'd you learn that? And I was like, oh, it's a tutorial online. Someone's already paying me for it. Everybody was launching apps. People were becoming millionaires overnight. Flappy Bird. I remember I refused to upgrade my phone because I didn't want to lose Flappy Bird because that was worth something. And in this time, right? Like we've become so accustomed to it, but like even here with text messages, people be like, oh, you're a green bubble. We're conditioned to be funneled into platforms, and I'm asking you to just tread lightly. You don't have to reject it. I own Oculus headsets. I try to use the Valve more, but I own an Oculus headset. I'll buy the Quest Pro. I'm definitely going to buy the next Valve headset. I'm probably going to buy the Apple headset. Right? I don't want to miss out. But you're going to see a lot of people, the masses, are going to suddenly become creators in the metaverse who right now are working at their desk, or they're making fabric, they're making clothing by hand in a studio that costs them a lot of money, and they can translate that into the metaverse, creating digital fashion. You're going to see it get easier and easier. So I set out to do something about it, and I took off work on March 31st. I have what's called a passion coach. I work at a company called Fearless, and Fearless is lovely and really cares about their people, and we have passion coaches, and they are awesome. So I told my passion coach, I said, Steph, I need to take off today because I was really stressed out about the metaverse. And I said, I need to take care of something, and I said, I'm gonna see how much I can change the world in one day. And so I sent out a tweet, and I said, hey y'all, every person I talk to trying to build this interoperable inventory, it seems like they all have their own way of doing it, and I'm realizing that I can't do this alone. It's also coming down to protocols. Like, even if I could get them to adopt it, like, how do we stand up to the behemoths? And people answered the call. A lot of people answered the call. People from Mozilla, most notably Robert Long, who actually then left Mozilla and focused more on OMI for months before going to Matrix. People like Evo, who I showed earlier. The gentleman who wrote the definition on Wikipedia actually gave us our name. Like, it was amazing. It became this round table. And so I'm like, okay, Caroline, who's right here. I'm like, I did it. All these people, all these platforms, they're all in my Discord. They're all here. And then she was like, well, don't blow it. And I'm like, oh yeah. And I started to realize there's so many ways to blow it, right? Like, do we just go out hard, start making a bunch of announcements, get a whole bunch of press, say, we're doing it, we're building the United Nations for the metaverse, right? Conversations start coming up. People then started asking questions like, hey, what's OMI's definition of the metaverse? And I had blockchainers and non-blockchainers in the group. And I said, we're not gonna do that. We're not gonna have that conversation. Let's have that conversation after we've been together for a year. Because what I started to foresee was I didn't want OMI to break up and become the blockchain version of OMI, the non-blockchain version of OMI, and the open source version of OMI, and the proprietary version of OMI. And the world has tried to do that so hard time and time again, but we've stayed true to our values. So OMI, or the Open Metaverse Interoperability Group, was born. We rallied around a common vision. I did my classic product management stuff. I wanted to make sure that we approached this with intent. And ran 4 workshops, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., 2 days in a row, because we had people all around the world attending, and we didn't want to, present ourselves as a United States dominated group again. Like, this is a worldwide thing. So we rallied around these core values, which we still hold true today, which is to maintain sustainable innovation, we have to create a cooperative, sustainable culture. In order to make the metaverse more human, we have to collaborate, driven by research, privacy, and accessibility. In order to constantly deliver value consistently, we incrementally discover and deliver value with intent. So we're incremental about it. That's the key word there that I have to remind my team about all the time. Empower the people making the metaverse. So we work with groups like M3, Metaverse Makers Meetup. If you want to check them out, they're awesome. But we want to incentivize contributions without losing the soul of open source. And then, of course, we need to cultivate resiliency, because it's so tempting for this little group of ours to break up and have new leaders and become new versions of itself. So we're global, and our work had to become async and accessible, so we formed into working groups. OMI is people from all around the world, different backgrounds, different interests. We chose to come together to co-create the protocols so that we didn't have to worry about competing over it, right? It's less threatening. Now people come and share what they're learning inside of their company, excited. Say, these are our findings. Protocol Labs shared a UX research document. It's the unreleased so far, but it actually led to the founding of the UX research team at LMI. We work with a number of different groups. We have a scripting group. We work directly with Kronos Group on GLTF extensions. Neil Trevitt, who founded the Metaverse Standards Forum, is a founding member of LMI, so we helped start MSF. And we've just been doing it this way for over a year. So we just shared our 73rd consecutive weekly gathering yesterday, and I encourage you all to get involved in groups like this. There's a ton out there. But OMI in particular, we do demos, we talk about ways that you can adopt these open protocols to enhance your platforms, your experiences. You can volunteer and get involved, you can donate money, you can also just use the stuff that we're making. That's like probably the most ideal, right? Is that it gets used. We talk about things like portal interop, content portability like wearables, home spaces. Jin, J-I-N is their name. They're like one of probably the most famous developers in our little field. Jin actually has this interoperable like workspace that they put in multiple platforms and continue to do so. And he's a leader when it comes to that stuff. So there's a lot of different ways that you can make a difference. I'll make this quick because I know we're coming up on the end of time. If you or your company are going to shift into the metaverse, please explore tools that don't trap you into an ecosystem. A local company recently announced they switched to the metaverse and they bought everybody an Oculus headset. Yay! VR makes people sick, makes me sick. I don't really like to talk about that because it kind of is like a no-no in our industry, but it makes me sick. So I like using my phone, my computer, the other devices that leverage APIs like WebXR. Any other headset, please explore them. Just any other ones. Those small ones, the Pico Neo 3, if you see these headsets come out, please throw some money that way because it's going to be high quality, it's just going to be a smaller brand. And if you're going to put your company in there again, explore open tools. So you can get into groups like OMI. We're recognized by Metaverse Standards Forum as part of the constellation of standards, but you don't have to go into OMI, right? There's XRSI, which focuses on safety and inclusion. You've got groups like Kronos Group, which work on file type extensions for GLTF and basically everything that powers the metaverse these days. There's a lot of ways to get involved in these groups, and you can reach out. If you want to start a business in the metaverse, try to build interoperable products. Try to leverage interoperable protocols. Just get involved. Show up, right? Make sure that you know the industry. We need it. We need it in identity and expression. We need, looks like I merged that. Let's just skip that, save you some time. And there's so much opportunity in the metaverse, right? So focus on, if you want to have a competitive edge, this is my manifesto. I'm raising a fund for an incubator that will only fund products that do this. And that is, create as-a-service interoperable products that leverage open standards that you don't have to make. If you do that, there are a ton of companies out there who tried to build a metaverse who are realizing that they are managing a wallet, inventory, a world, a full economy, like people who are angry, people who are new, like new devices constantly. They have so many things that they're already juggling that everyone who started off with the land and expand model is now starting to realize, holy cow, we should have gone more modular. And so from Voxels, people I love, they said the wearables marketplace is messed up, bro. We had a plan to fix it, but it's a lot of work. So I'm looking for an easier way, a third-party marketplace that we can integrate. There's a wide open startup right there. It's a multi-billion-dollar market, I guarantee you. So explore, volunteer, donate, and share Metaverse standards bodies. And if you're going to build, accept that you're probably not the first or only person with your idea. There's a lot of music NFT startups here in DC. I hope I didn't hurt anybody in this room. I keep going, I believe in. We need music NFTs. Nobody's gotten it right yet, but you're probably not the only one. Everyone who talks to me about this always says, I'm the only music NFT startup in the area. I'm like, okay. Well, just understand you're probably not the only one, and be kind. And if you're gonna invest in or offer a metaverse product, make sure it works. So this company, Genies, raised $150 million at $1 billion valuation. Tim Sweeney from Epic Games said, what games do they work in? The response, none. When we choose to see ourselves as nodes in the metaverse rather than competing to be the origin, we can achieve so much more. Metaverse Standards Forum, what they've done is accumulated probably close to 2,000 pledges from companies, including Meta, who have agreed that the only way the metaverse is going to come to fruition is through open and collaborative standards. This is within the last 3 months. So the work that our little group and other groups like that have been doing did make a difference, and you can make a difference by participating in this way. Of course, if you're looking to invest in the metaverse, I'm always at your service. And if you want to meet me in the metaverse, here's some links to different parcels. Thank you.
One or two questions, and then we'll wrap up after that.
Absolutely.
Hi, my name is Mickey, and thanks so much, and really helpful. And I'm just curious about one thing. My company, we were basically we document for Metaverse. We XR, we like production house. And you mentioned one thing about VR, right? Because for our company, we actually do something based on customer need. They need the avatar look like this or the architecture like this, right? But,
Okay.
And if you do something for them, it's going to be a different thing. And how can end up, I just mentioned about VR, that everybody make their own thing, and how can we be in the standard?
Yeah.
The same thing. And
So,
what is a shortcut at a startup like the smaller like my company? Be able to go to certain point and say, hey, we build for you, and you don't have to come back and re-access the whole thing again.
yeah. Whoa, that's a good question. That's a good question. Okay, so, and I'll give you a pretty quick answer actually. So when it comes to adopting DRM, their documentation is actually pretty strong, and it's actually relatively straightforward to be able to implement adding DRM to your platform. So if you're using an engine of any kind, Unity, Godot, there's plenty out there. If you're using any of them, there's a really high chance that they support, actually everything I just named will support being able to add DRM to your client's system or program or app. When it comes to, if you have an idea for a protocol, you want to go to one of these groups in the systems, in this constellation of standards, you can come to OMI. We have a system for submitting and proposing protocols, right? Like, we're not building the metaverse. It's a ton of companies and people have come together to co-create the protocols. So we have a process where you can actually propose and say, hey, we're a fashion wearables company. We want to propose this solution for wearables. Or if you don't have the solution, you can say, we're a fashion wearables company, and we don't have the solution for interoperable wearables. And you can come to a group like OMI, and they'll work through it with you, because we need people to propose the protocols. We don't originate them. They come from outside. And so that way they're co-created, and it's not an ego thing.
All right, Cody, so I'm going to split this last 1 minute into 30 seconds for 2 people. So this is the perfect time to work on the pitch, elevator pitch. So 10 seconds for a question, 20 minutes for answer.
Okay, so I guess we're gonna have to chat later. But I had a very simple question for you. Since you said you have a meta tattoo and you work in the metaverse, I want to know what is your definition of meta in general?
Yeah. So I have, it's big meta, big verse.
Let's see it.
It's split. Let's see it. You can see it anywhere online. We're at work in public. So. Yeah, so in my definition of the metaverse is the digital equivalent of the universe. So just digital counterpart, or if you look at my graphic, it's a bubble inside of the universe, but all things digital. So you're all probably part of it already.
Hello, everyone. My name is Edna. My general question, so there is a lot of vernacular that I am not familiar with. I'm not sure if everyone else is very familiar, but where do you even start? Like, is OMI also a place to just get general knowledge?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we are a place that you can do that. Angel XR, which is my group, we're an incubator. We've actually only been incubating open source projects since OMI, because OMI was so important to exist that it became my primary focus. So you can join the Angel community. We do things like hackathons. There's a lot of ways to learn. There's also a Metaverse jobs board, so it's a great way to post if you're hiring and not have people attack you for spamming their Discord. We have a place for it. So that's a great way. The last plug, 10-second plug, is my elevator pitch. I have an open source project called Metaverse Dev. The URL was given to me by somebody who asked that I help make sure it empowers the open metaverse. So we're using it as an open source project to help people become metaverse creators. So that means Vsakai, Webaverse, other platforms out there. will be sharing their documentation on how to become like them, how to become a developer, how to use Blender, how to do this or that. And we want to help people for free. So if you want to get involved in a group like Metaverse Dev, they meet once a month on Mondays. I can connect you. We need like literally so much different types of skills because it's a small group right now.
You said it was what?
Metaverse Dev. Yep, DEV. It's not live yet. It's a pretty pricey domain that was given to me as like a safe harbor to make sure that a certain company didn't buy it.
All right. Can we get one more? Clap it up for Jesse.
Hey.